Okay, so the recording has officially begun. This is Professor Victor Gazarin. How's everyone doing? I teach creative writing at the Hialeah campus. And this is Juan Navarro. I want to thank Juan for joining us today and taking time from his schedule to talk to students about the creation of comic books and really looking at the industry and the medium as an art form. Real quick, I want to do a couple of thank yous to make sure that we get everyone included here. Big thank you to Media Services for being here and supporting us with all the technology. I want to thank specifically Andrea Forero for sponsoring the event and Student Services, so thank you for that. And just thank you to the campus community. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to moderate the chat here on the computer. But this is Juan's show, so Juan, the floor is yours.
Thank you guys so much. Like you mentioned, my name is Juan Navarro. I've been a comic book artist, comic book creator for over 20 years. I am the owner of Goblin's Heist here in Miami. I also am the publisher for Creature Entertainment, also out of Hialeah, and had a lot of years doing comics. So I'm really glad for you guys to be here. We might have mentioned it before, I love Q&A. I'm a big Q&A person, so if you guys have questions as I go, anything in particular you're wondering about, or if I touch on something, please feel free, raise your hand, tell me what's up. Victor's watching the thingy, so he'll tell me all the other stuff. Mostly what this is going to be about is an overview of comics. What it is, what you can do with it, and everything else. It's a tool, just like anything else that you're going to use. If you're going to go into, even if you're going to go into something else like film or into novels or into something like that, it's something that can apply to anything because you can use it and utilize it to tell any story. So just to get started, one of the reasons why some of the images I have in the back is just pertinent because this is by Johnny Craig. He's a current comic book artist, and one of the things he drew about this, he was drawing about Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby is considered the king of comic books. He created many of the characters like Fantastic Four, like Spider-Man, like everything else. And he kind of drew it. But what I love about this drawing, and the reason I have it up, is that if you notice, he's drawing on the page, but there's people standing over him. And it's the characters. And so that's the relationship you sometimes have as a comic book creator, as a writer, as anything. Those characters are always with you. You want to get them out. And I love this drawing for it because it's very simple. It's something that gets to the point of what it's like to be a comic book creator. It's you alone with a page, even if the page is on a monitor, if it's if you're writing it on a screen, if it's in a sketchbook, it's you on a page making something up. And it's incredible fun. And like I said, I've devoted 20 years of my life to it. So I go by the term fuacata. It's one of the things I like to use. If you follow me, everything is fuacata.com, fuacata and everything else. I made up this way of saying it. I did it phonetically because I'm a Cuban-Mexican artist. I was born here in Hialeah, Florida, raised here and everything else. And I started my education in Savannah College of Art. I ended up at University of Florida. And then from there, I worked all across the country in different places, everywhere from, I've worked for IGN, I've worked for Marvel, I worked for DC, I've worked for various Upper Deck, various game companies. Out of Chicago, San Francisco. And what happens is being Cuban, one of the first things that happens is you start telling a story, you start telling somebody something, and you start using your own language, your own way, and it's like, bro, this guy come out, and all of a sudden, fuacata, the guy hit the other guy, and they're like, wait, what is that? So I had to explain to people what fuacata is. And for us, it's a sound effect. And so for me, it's perfect. It's a Cuban sound effect. And I'm being a Cuban comic book artist, I adopted it as my own moniker. So it's something that I carry with me. I use it a lot of times, and just for people to recognize it. I also own the comic book shop. This is this is actually an old picture of Goblin's Heist. It's expanded since then, right there off of Palm Avenue. I've been doing that and been in the retail industry for about 6 years. So I got to be on both sides. As a creator and a publisher, I've been able to make comics for the audience, and now I've been on the other side where I'm selling comics to the audience. So I know how the industry works. I know what people like, what people don't like, how different the industry is according to the city. What people like here and what people like in New York are two different things. So it's interesting to see that overall. I also do this to explain what I do for a living sometimes as far as the value of comics. I also deal with collections and rare comic books and stuff like that. I've sold a couple of comic books for $3,000 to $4,000 just to save my comic book shop during the COVID crisis because of my own collection. And I go and pick up collections all the time, and I look at the value of that and how that works as an art and as an industry. So that's something that I also deal with. This is me trying to explain to them how comics are going to go up in price. But I'm also an artist, and one of the things I like to do is just messing around. Sometimes I think a sketchbook is the most wonderful thing you can have, even if you're not an artist per se. But even as a writer or anything, you should draw your ideas, put those ideas down. That's just me one day saying, I wish I could shoot my fist at people and punch them via piñazo. So I love comic books, as you can see. One of the things that, since I was a little kid, it was actually at Westland Mall, I got my first comic book. I got a Heathcliff comic book at bookstores. When they used to have bookstores there. And then from there, I ended up at Charlie's Comics here in Hialeah, which used to be a comic book store here in Hialeah for many years through the 80s and 90s. And I fell in love with the whole world. I fell in love with everything on there. It was something I always came back to. So I started creating my own comic books. And one of the comic books I created was Zombie Years, a post-apocalyptic zombie tale that takes place in Miami. This happened at the same time as Walking Dead dropped, because I think we were inspired by the same thing, Evil Dead. I know I talked to one of the artists from Walking Dead, and we talked about that one time, about the zombie thing and everything. Everybody at the same time came to the same conclusion. They did the best bet, but I did my own version because I wanted to see our city in that situation. And I think being from a Cuban background, being from a Caribbean background, and being a Latin background, we would take things very differently. If you can live in an island like Cuba with all the dictatorship and all this other crap that's happening, I think, zombies are going to be nothing. Like, that's going to be easy, And then over here, everybody has bars on their windows. Every time a hurricane comes, what do? You shutter the windows, you save food, you wait out the storm. What do you do here with a zombie apocalypse? The same thing. When you go to Abuela's house, you hang out, you wait for so I feel that we would do a lot better on it. So I did this series for about 8 years. From 2004 till 2010, 2012, and developed about 10 issues. I wish I could say it's finished, but it's not finished. I have some stories more to tell, but I did leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger. Hopefully next year I'm going to be finishing the issue 10 that was last seen on it. Right now it is on webtoons.com, and I'll get into webcomics also for you guys. If you have any questions about webcomics and how to develop it and how to put your books out there that way. And right now it's doing pretty good. I have like about 3,000 subscribers and everything else, even as the book is just hanging there right now. There's stories and there's stories. And again, this is my comic book shop, The Goblin's Heist. Again, I created the logo, the little goblin. I wanted something that sounded like real nerd. Like, I wanted to be a real nerd shop. Everybody has like these really fancy names, like Infinite Realities and Galactic whatever. And I'm like, nah, dude, it's a Goblin's Heist, bro. It's just a bunch of nerds looking at comics. And we do a lot of stuff with the community. We do a lot of stuff that we want to work with. I think part of it is being part of something that's, not only you, but your other people you can share. And that's where it's the most fun and everything else. So that's the front of my store. It's also houses Creature Entertainment, which is my comic book studio. We actually have offices in the back where we actually have right now a music studio producing scores for movies, my offices and my studio for my artwork. And right now we have Daniel Dolitsky there. We have other artists that come in and out, like Jeff DeCal, who does work for Marvel and DC. Jose Variz, who also does artwork for Aspen and a couple of other ones, and Kenny Calderon, who also does work for Upper Deck and Marvel, alongside with me. So that's a better shot of the shop inside. Again, pretty old pictures of the shop. Cool thing about being at a comic book shop, you get to meet different people. So that's OG Geek. He's really big on YouTube. He came by the shop. He got to buy the first issue of my comic, another comic I made, which was called Tommy. It's about a little boy with an imaginary friend, finds out the imaginary friend's a serial killer. So the book is really, it's a great response back in 2015. We're planning to bring it back. COVID kind of stopped us because we haven't been able to do conventions and everything else. But I've been drawing the whole time during COVID, so I have 3 more issues done. So that's going to be coming out soon. But it's cool because you get to meet everybody. That's the Creature logo. And so again, like I said, you get to do, the other side of it that's been fun is I've been able to travel. I go to San Diego Comic-Con. I've gone to Emerald City Comic-Con, Puerto Rico Comic-Con, New York, Myrtle Beach, Knoxville, Chicago, Atlanta, I've been all over the country and got to meet all types of comic book nerds, which has been super fun, and been able to share the work. And that was us at San Diego Comic-Con. That's my partner, John, with his hands up in the air. He's my publisher, also my partner at the comic book shop. And he's another Hialeah native, big fan of comics, just like me. He actually started a comic book company in the 90s called High Impact. And that was before the big crash in 96. We can get into that if anybody wants to know about that. But he would have one of the premier comic book companies producing work at that time, and was in the top 10 for Wizard Magazine 2 or 3 months in a row, and everything else. I don't know if there's anybody, is that somebody asking something?
Yeah, the comments saying yes.
Okay. This is us at Chicago. This is a panel I did. I like this panel very much because that was a panel I got to do with other minority comic book creators, like Enrique Jang and the Sun Brothers. And I remember somebody was like, oh, a Latinx author. And I was like, no, I'm not a Latinx author. I'm a Latino author. And, I don't really subscribe to that. I think that's really making other people more comfortable than ourselves. I don't really believe in Latinx. And I got to have a really good thing. But the best part was when I told people you can find my stuff at flocata.com, half the audience laughed their ass off. The other half was like, what? And then hopefully they explained to each other everything. That was another convention. That was with Jose Variz. I believe that was in, I want to say Seattle. So that was us in different parts of the country. That's Tommy himself. That was that's a Chicago Comic-Con variant that I did with Manuel Sotomayor. His name is E-Man online. Great t-shirt designer. We got to work there. So I got to work with other artists that I always like to work with. Emmy's somebody that's also local that started working with us. He's in LA now, producing a lot of different work for TV and movies. That's Daniel Delitsky. That's something we did with Comics Exposure. That was a variant that we did. And then it was cool to meet fans of ours. And that was a book, Ravenous, which is a werewolf book, and having fans dress up as characters and come in and read stuff. That was kind of cool, too, to see them dress up as everything. And then, again, you get to meet all types of people. This is another fan that he came in with one of his ice costumes from Mr. Freeze and Batman. And you get to meet all types of people. So like I also met Arya Stark when she was starting in Game of Thrones. And that's another cool thing. I've gotten to meet a lot of my heroes in comics and a lot of celebrities in Hollywood. And they became fans of our work, and they picked up our comics and everything. She has a copy of Zombie Years there, Forgive Me Father, Another World, which is Patrick Arley's book. I've met other people, but a lot of times I can't mention it, so I don't think we'll be telling them about that. Moving forward, so I want to talk about influences. One of my biggest influences is obviously Uncanny X-Men and Jim Lee. This is in the 90s, so for some of you, this is like old. But for me, this has always been new. And what kind of work they were doing, which is familial. A lot of it was seeing these group of people on from different backgrounds fighting the same fight and understanding the same fight and everything else. And I was like, okay, I'm like, what happened? There's boxes of stuff. So that's another thing too. So going into Green Lantern. The Max by Sam Keith was one of the first independent books that I really got into. I got out of comics for a little bit. I was in an art magnet program. I was painting, I was sculpting. I was having fun, but I wasn't totally into it until I had a girlfriend at that time that used to videotape the Max every time it came on Liquid Television on MTV. And I saw it. I was like, who is this guy? What's this about? I had to learn more. Found out it was a comic book. It brought me back into comics. So I started reading the Max for a long time, this guy named Sam Keith. And I saw how he was doing his panels. I saw how he was making things, and I'm like, wow, you can make comics a different way. It's not only one way. And that's one thing I will tell you guys. There's no one way of making comics. There's no oh, this is the only way, this is the way. There's proven ways and ways that might work, but whatever works for you is the best way as long as you're producing the work. There's a lot of room for your stories. There's no reason to think also that you don't have a right to tell a story. You always have a right to tell a story. We need to hear your stories. So this is what proved to me just seeing these kind of panels and everything else. So there's a huge influence on me. The other influence being Todd McFarlane. That was a huge influence on me artistically. Yes?
I actually like Tom McFarlane first.
Yeah, Tom McFarlane's he's one of the few guys, I've met a lot of celebrities, like I said. One of the few times I've ever been starstruck at a convention is meeting Tom McFarlane. He was at his booth putting shelves up. And I was like, I can't believe it's here. Like I've met like Jason Momoa, and I'm just like, hey, bro, what's up? Like I don't, it doesn't matter to me. That to me is the coolest thing in the world. I was starstruck with it. So what are comics? That's the thing that some people ask. Like in the end, people have sat down. There's a term that we use called sequential art. And we'll probably get into it later when we talk about Will Eisner. But the main thing about it is that Scott McCloud wrote a great book called Understanding Comics. So one of the things, so he put this together, the juxtaposed pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence to tell a story. I'm going to add the tell a story. Sometimes the tell a story, it doesn't make sense. It's what you put together. Sometimes it's literally something that's a sequence, like somebody running. Sometimes it's literally 3 different things, and when you put them together in your mind, it makes something else. There's a lot of leeway on it. But most of the time, we talk about, does that mean it all looks the same? No. Like sometimes you have stuff like this, like our Crumb, where it's more kind of funky and crazy and cartoony, to something more action-packed, and you see the sequence there of the talk between Ultron and Vision, and you see the punch coming out and everything else, and it's like very realistic, to something abstract almost, and where it's a person walking upon many, many things, or something as like where it's a mix of all these things, and you see somebody come together, an abstract idea becomes a solidified idea over the panel. What's happening is you're putting these pictures together in your head. As you look at the first one and the second one, and you're reading left to right, you're reading what's happening in these panels. And all of a sudden the story's coming together in it. That's the magic of comics. That's the magic of sequential art. Then some things get more abstract. When we look at some Japanese artists, I think it's Shotaro Kago, he's done things where literally the panels bend and he has 3-dimensional space being occupied in it. And that's another way of telling a story. This is a recent book that just came out this week called Castle Waiting. It was taken after Castle Waiting, Animal Castle, after Animal Farm. And Animal Farm, if you're in college, you should be familiar by now, by George Orwell. But this was taking it even further and taking it into almost a Game of Thrones sort of look at it. And the way the sequences put together, the way you see the animals and the talking, the pictures are coming together, and you see this is the beginning sequence of the story, and it's so rough and it's so hard. It leaves you just like wondering how everything happened. That's how the story begins. And it's a great study and a great way of putting something together where you allow something to breathe, something to come in. It's not so concentrated. It pulls in, it pulls out, and you're left with a story. And it's an amazing work. I wanted to just put something recent on here. And some things are more abstract, where you don't really know what's going on, and then just something just comes together in front of you. So when we come back to what Scott McCloud was saying, he gets into more about, and he makes the joke. He's like, what about Batman? Does that have to have Batman in it? Not necessarily. Here in the United States, we went through a little bit of a bad time of censorship where they went after a lot of horror books, romance books, and everything else. I forgot the good gentleman's name. Seduction of the Innocent.
Yeah, the psychologist.
Yeah, I forgot. Well, he charged that comics were destroying kids' brains, and they actually had fires, burnings. They burned books in here. Some people went after comic books. Some people went after everything. So it developed what's called the Comics Code, and that's why all we see now are superhero comics. Meanwhile, in other countries, when they started adopting comics, they took it as real literature. So you will see the differences within, let's say, European comic books, Japanese comic book, mangaka, and how they're being made. Their changes are completely different. Like they were allowed to blossom and be more adult. We got to go through that and through some trials and tribulations in the 70s, 80s, but really in the 90s with the birth of the Vertigo imprint and everything else, had real stories that are for adults, that were everybody can. I got to re-meet through the Miami Book Fair, Art Spiegelman. He's the one comic book artist who won the Pulitzer Prize for Mouse. After he won the Pulitzer Prize, the Pulitzer Committee made a rule finally that said no comic book artist or no comic books would ever win the Pulitzer Prize again, unfortunately. So that is a tip to the art form, how great it is that it can reach across and get that, but it's also supposed to show there's still some resentment to comics and seen as kids. It's not a kid's thing. It's like saying a hammer is just, only to hit wood. Hammers are used for other things. So you have to look at it as a tool and try to use that and apply it. This is a local comic book artist named Jairo Antigua. He does a couple of different things. He does a Happy Daymare and a couple other things. Good buddy of mine, and I wanted to show you his process and stuff. So sometimes, like, me and him have different ways of putting stuff together, but it's great because he's somebody that will literally sit down and just start scribbling a comic. He doesn't think about a script. He doesn't think about a story. He's like, he has an outline in his head. He's like, I want this to happen, this to happen, this to happen. So he just starts scribbling. This is all done on his iPad, and he puts it together. He starts shading and putting different things together, and then he starts inking. And it's like, I think in the end, the idea of how a cafecito and a medianoche are made, and the cracking of a pig's head and all this other stuff, he gets into some kind of weird, kind of things to put it together. And just to make this story, and this is like the finished product. He did this for a local anthology that came out last year. By the other side, I was working with a good friend of mine, my friend Keith. He was making a book called Shara, The Chronicles of Shara, Malaysia. And I did the lettering for it, and I helped some of the design work. This is with Kenny Calderon. He's also a local comic book artist working at a Kendall. And Keith Wade, Keith came to me with it. He said, I need some help on the design. So we started putting it together. This is taking place in a near future Senegal. And he was writing about this character, kind of making his own version of Star Wars, using these African-American characters, using these African characters, and applying it to it. And because of that, he was able to make a very powerful character that stood out. And it's really cool because I like this book because not only is it all my friends working, but a bunch of friends of different backgrounds. So I've been able to work with the African American Research Library here in Fort Lauderdale to feature this book. I've been able to work with other African American artists, Asian American artists, Dominican artists, all types. And it's great because sometimes we don't agree. We probably sometimes have different politics, different ways of thinking, different backgrounds, but we all like comics. So to me, that's like the coolest thing in comics. Like we could be on the different backgrounds, but hey, the Hulk's pretty cool. So we come back to this. So it's the same way. We wanted to make this really great, and we just had a pretty good Kickstarter for that. That should be coming out next year. Issue 1's out. Issue 2 should be coming out soon. So there's more pages from there, like I said. And then this is another artist named Jude Million that I got to work with. Great artist, Asian American artist. He did a cover for me for Zombie Years. He actually worked on The Crow for a little bit. He actually worked on, what was the other one? Razor. I'm like, remember Blade? The Blade on our Razor, and he worked on that for a while too. So he's also local. So there's a lot of local artists here that you guys need to know that there's a really great scene in making comics here. So if you want to make comics, it's excellent. Yes?
There's a question here saying, have you ever made a comic because you thought no one would like the idea? How do you overcome those feelings of self-doubt?
That's a good one. First off, even if I'm brilliant, and I think there's times that I'm brilliant, I'm always thinking like, I'm the smartest man in the world. 10 minutes later, I'm like, what am I thinking? I'm wrong with me. Who's going to do this? I think if it's making you uncomfortable, if it makes you a little scared, you're on the right path. You have to get over that because in the end, that's an inflated sense of self also, because you're going to really think people are going to, I'd rather have somebody really care about what you do or don't do. I think people are going to more care about you doing something, even if it's wrong, than you doing nothing. It's better to do something and be kind of off than to do something or to do nothing and not do it at all. I think that's always been my stance. And I've done questionable comics. I have comics that are very objectionable. I have stuff that I've done that I could even say is cancelable. I could be canceled because of it, because of the language that's used or what was going on in it. I stand by it. I'd rather do that than not do it. I think it's better to have it done. I have a friend of mine, he is a prop maker, and he makes all these crazy projects. He makes these things that are like ridiculous. And I go to his studio sometimes and we hang out. His studio is his garage. We'll be there drinking coffee, talking. And he always says it, and excuse the language, but he says it's better to have, my piece of shit is better than your perfect nothing. So it's better to have something that maybe isn't okay, or maybe it kind of sucks, or maybe it's that you made, but you got it out of you, than having nothing. So I always took that as something that, and he is a guy that makes things all day. And you should see his trash. His trash is like awesome. Like when he throws away, I'm like, you're throwing this away? And it's like, yeah, it didn't work out. But he'd rather make it than not have done it. And he'll tell me like, that was a whole like day of work. I just worked on that and I'm throwing it away because it didn't work out. But I got it out of my system. And I tell people too this, you probably have, your first comic's gonna suck. Your first comic book is gonna suck. It is what it is. Just imagine picking up the guitar for the first time and a beautiful ballad is gonna come out. No, it's gonna suck. It's supposed to. It's okay if it does. You're not supposed to be a genius off the center. It's on your 10th, on your 100th, on your 200th. You get that out of you and you make something good. And if you're really good, what's gonna happen is that the first time you make something really good, a year later, you're gonna look at it and be like, this is a piece of garbage because you're gonna be advancing. So I would dare say, get over that. Put your head down and think for yourself. I have a policy that if I'm not having fun making it, no one's gonna have fun reading it. I have fun making it. I giggle to myself like a maniac. I look like a weirdo at the drawing table. I'm there drawing and doing something, and I have fun. And I know then that it's gonna apply to other people. It's so much better to have it out there than to have it nowhere, And you'll appreciate it too. And it's nice to look back and say, oh man, remember when I made this? Oh man, remember when I made that? And I've had stuff that I made back in 1996. And I've had fans bring it to me and be like, oh, I love this. Can you sign it? I'm like, oh my God, why do you have this? This is horrible. So it's good to have. I'd say get over it, make it. It's better to be out there than anything else. Like I said, so sketchbook's my main thing. That's a picture of a friend of mine. I just drew her. I just like that drawing a lot. I like sharing it. But I carry a sketchbook with me all the time. I always have a sketchbook with me in any way or form. And I'm always sketching and putting stuff together. And so when I'm thinking of my work and what I want, I have a certain humor I want, a certain kineticness I want, a certain message I want to display. And I go by that. And as long as I remember that, I have a good guide of where I'm going. I never get lost. I think a lot of times people get worried because they get lost as they start creating something. You have to develop that center line. And I say center line because I got taught that when I was, I used to surf when I was younger. I was a lot skinnier too. But when I surfed down there, my friend taught me how to be on a surfboard and he told me, just remember your center line, the center of the board, where it is, here's what you're gonna work with. And as I started doing that and I started learning this, I applied it to my stories. When you think, sometimes I ask people, what is your story about? Not the plot, not the characters, not the world. What is your story about? And what I mean that is it a love story? Is it a horror story? Is it an action story? Is it somebody overcoming something? Is it somebody, doing something horrible? Is it a redemption story? What is it about? Bring that forth, and now you know where you're coming from. That's your center line, and then you can branch out and do all these other things. I used to always say, like, Game of Thrones, is in essence a family story. It's a family story, this family that goes through all this crap and now they come out ahead, if you watch all Game of Thrones, in the end, and not ahead. They also went through all these travesties, but it makes you care. It's the same way if you ever read Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. There's these huge things, they made movies out of 2 paragraphs of that book. They made whole movies. So then there's going to be a lot of times where you're going through this, and it's not so much the story that's being told or what happened, but you've got the experiences over time with the characters. And again, it's about family, it's about that togetherness. A lot of times for me, it's about community. I think community is the #1 thing to combat anything. As long as your community is strong, as long as you're talking to your neighbors, as long as you guys are together on it, you can overcome anything. That's the amazing thing about human beings. Human beings, when we're together, oh man, we get anything done, bad or good. So I always try to keep that in the center line. So when I develop comics, sometimes I develop them in a small way. I have a grid system where I just post this up, I just put it together, and I literally just start drawing little panels and everything else. Mm-hmm.
We have a question here asking, do you have an opinion on reading comics, graphic novels in e-format rather than in print?
I think whatever you enjoy. I like in print, but I still read stuff on there. One thing I'm almost like, I hate telling people this. If you ever get a chance, get your library card, your Miami Dade library card, or your Hialeah one. Get your library card. You go on there and download some apps like Hoopla, and you can read comics on there. All the comics are available. You can read any manga, You can read almost everything. The library buys a lot of good comics. I hate telling this to people because I own a comic book shop and I want you to buy the damn things. Now, that being said, I've been able to catch up with certain series because of that. Because I've been able to get through that and start reading it and everything else. So I always tell people, try using that. I prefer in print. There's times I read things in digital just because it's more convenient. I own the Kindle. I have a lot of things on there that I read. Especially when I'm traveling, and can't really go through the airport with an absolute Watchman under your arm, right? Like I try, you'd be that guy in the airplane, like, that would be a funny skit. I would do that. I would be on the plane just pulling out an absolute Watchman and be like, okay. So I like that, but I like having a floppies. I like having comics. I like having graphic novels. I like having things in print in hand. This to me was handed to me at the Miami Book Fair from Radiator Comics and Black Jose Press. There's an anthology they did through the James Knight Foundation. If you guys ever get a chance, take a look at it by Jamila Razer and Neil Brito. People are making great comics locally and everything else. It was cool to have. It's risographed. It's like in my hand. I can feel the paper. I can feel the ink. Risograph is like almost like a type of screen printing for it. So you have these kind of cool colors. I love stuff like this. This is the stuff I love to have in my hand. In the end, most of the time I want my books in print in one form or another. But there's a lot of great web comics. There's a lot of great books on ebooks that you can download. So whatever format is your preferred, do it. I would just say that if, like, let's say, and let's, call it what it is. If you're stealing it, if you're torrenting stuff, everybody does, unfortunately. One time I even did that too before I had a comic book shop. And you're gonna do yourself a favor. If you really like the book, go buy it. Go buy the comic, support the writer and artist, support the team creating it, just because there's a lot of guys out there struggling just to get that book into your hands. It's a lot of work. Do what you can to support them.
Another question here says, if you have a movie/show in mind, but don't have the resources to start, is it a good idea to start a comic of the story first?
All right. I have like two problems. Not two problems. I have two sides for this. First off, yes, it's an excellent way of getting it. The big advantage with the comic book, especially if you're an artist, like for me, I'm a writer-artist, so I get to create my own worlds. I have no budget. I can blow the budget as much as I want. I can blow up planets. I can draw anybody I want in it. I can make them do whatever I want in it. So the best thing is I can do however I want. As long as I have a paper and a pencil, I can make a comic and I can make whatever I want. The downside of it, it's a different format. I tell a lot of people the same thing. If you want to make a TV show, if you want to make a cartoon, you want to make a movie, you want to make an animation, go make that. Don't waste time making comics and you're making something that you're not into, because it is its own art form. Now, is it a good stepping stone? Hell yeah. I'll tell you that right now. All over Hollywood, one of the biggest revelations that happened for independent comic book artists right now, and Todd McFarlane said this at one of the cons. He said, if you want to make a Marvel book into a movie now, you can't, because Disney's going to make it. If you wanted to make a DC book into a movie now, you can't. Warner Brothers is going to make it. So what do the movie companies have to do? They have to go to the independent creators. Look at somebody like Mark Millar. He created Kick-Ass. He helped to write The Authority. He's now doing a bunch of different stuff. What was this last series that kind of bombed that was on Netflix? The superhero one.
Super Crook?
No, the one before that. Super Crooks is the one he just did. That's what he's doing really good.
Supreme?
No, I forgot. I'm having such a brain fart today. He did that book, and it just did it. Jupiter's Legacy. There you go. Jupiter's Legacy. That series was not the book, by the way, but he did that. Now he has a $4 million deal with Netflix. Anything he writes and creates goes to Netflix first and is developed. I mean, so this is an independent artist that's blowing up. Brian K. Vaughan, who did Why the Last Man, supposedly has the same deal right now with Amazon. There's other creators like Rick Remender with Deadly Class. Robert, he was a writer for for Walking Dead. He did that with Invincible. So right now it's like a great time to create a comic and try to shop it around. What used to be, you could go to San Diego Comic-Con. So some background. Creature Entertainment, my group, we had an agent for 4 years. So we went to San Diego Comic-Con. We got to show our work. We got this agent, really cool. He got like, his claim to fame was he got the Final Destination movies made. So he was like, oh man, we're going to totally work together. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. When you get into that world, right, this is what's going to happen. Oh, this is cool. What is this? Oh, man, this looks great. This is a great book. Oh, that's werewolves? No. What else you have? So that's what that world, that's like a lot of people will stay with pitches and stay with scripts and stay with, because now you know the whole comic book. I have a zombie book comic book. Walking Dead was happening. They didn't want to know anything about that. Threw it to the side. I had a werewolf comic book on Ravenous. Werewolf movies and stories tend to fail and are hard to produce and are expensive. Threw it to the side. You start learning really hard what happens. Now, if you want to develop something, this is the thing that happens too. Some of the stuff that's out there, this is a scriptwriter friend of mine told me this. He developed a story and he pitched it to an executive. When he pitched it to the executive, the guy goes, that's great. I love it. Let's do it. So it was like, oh, wow. So when they had lunch, then they came back to the meeting and they're like, all right, cool. So this is what I was thinking about with the characters. And the guy goes, well, what book is this based on? And he goes, no, it's not a book. It's an original idea. And I goes, I can't do it now. He goes, what do you mean? Like, you just loved it an hour ago. We went and had lunch and then we come back and you love now, you know, that goes, yeah, but it could cost my job. Because what happened is they want to see something that has a base. So if it's a podcast, look at that's another thing. People are creating podcasts now. So if you create a podcast for it, if you create a mini movie, if you have a audio book, if you have a ebook, people will find you. Let's say you get 1,000 followers, so that they get on there, and then people will pay attention. But if it's just something out of the blue and here it is, and this is what it's, they might not. So right now, the best thing you can do is produce something independently, find a following for it. That's what they're scaling for. They're looking at audiobooks, they're looking at podcasts, and they're seeing that because they rather have something that already has a built-in audience and is kind of proven, unlike something else that will go to a focal group, they'll go to this, they'll go to that, and they'll say, no, let's keep that. So that's where people are going to. In comics, all the time, there's indie books. Noctera by Scott Snyder just got picked up. I'm always like, every week some book is getting picked up. So it is a great way of getting an idea out there. You're taking the long way around. Again, my advice has always been, if it's a show that you want to do or something like that, if there's a lot of effects, I rather, I don't know, put your efforts into making that a reality, even if it's a trailer for something, than bogging yourself down with a comic book. But in the long run, it's not a bad idea to do. It's not a bad idea to do. So I tell people to try it out. All right. Anyway, moving on. So there's other formats and other ways of telling a story. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up is Paying the Land by Joe Sacco. He's actually a sequential, what we used to call a sequential journalist. He was like a blogger. What he did was he decided to draw, he would travel and draw these stories of places he traveled. So he traveled to Gaza, he traveled to Bosnia, he traveled to a lot of war-torn places, and drew what was happening and wrote. That's how he decided to relay his story. And some of it, if you ever get a chance, pick up any of Joe Sacco's books. They're heavy duty. They're heavy books. They're hard stuff to look at sometimes. But it's very human and very beautiful story work. And he, you know, how like the GIs were, and he was on both sides, and how some of those guys, like, this is a horrible story about a soldier waving a cigarette in front of a person in front of a fence and torturing him. And some people have given him, you know, because he's an anti-American. Other people say he's storytelling, but he's saying his point of view and putting it out there. And I want to show that's like the main thing, that's a story that you need to tell, is your point of view. That's what makes it so unique, you know? And this is one of the best things. A lot of times this is him just writing about him drawing and listening to Lightning Hopkins and his relationship with music and how he loves music and everything else. This is him in Cairo. So this is, I love this page because it kind of shows you like how he can show the chaoticness of Cairo. I don't know his background, but I think he has some Egyptian in him or something. So that's right, he travels out of the Middle East. So when he goes in there, he's just showing off like how chaotic it is, how everybody's talking on top of each other, how everybody is on there, and just captures a moment in one page that I think, you know, you can argue, how would you do this in film, or how would you do this in a podcast, or how would you do this with a short, and he captured it in a page so perfectly. And it lets you understand how chaotic and how crazy a place like Cairo is. And again, him and his relationship with this music, coming back to it, and showing off like how, like, you know, like I said, on that bottom paragraph, everything's, you know, that moment of genius that we all have as comic where perhaps I'm not such a fraud after all. Perhaps I am the genius they say I am. And then at the same time, tomorrow night lightning, and when he does, it's just the radio. The radio's gone. So his relationship with the music and everything else. I think when you start making comics, you gotta develop the right habits to make them. Get a comfortable chair, get a comfortable place, because you gotta be there for hours at a time trying. It takes on average for many comic book artists a day to make one page. A day. So 8 hours, 12 hours. For me, it takes me about 8 hours. I do 2 hours in the morning. Sometimes in the afternoon, I do another hour while I'm running the shop. And if it's slow, I get another 2 hours. And then when I get home, I do another 2 hours. And hopefully I'll have something done. And if not, I can't finish it off the next day. So a lot of times, so you have to have that comfort. And, you start listening to podcasts, you start listening to music, you start listening to audiobooks, everything you can to just keep it going. People to ask you, have you seen the latest episode? I'm like, no, I have never seen that. I haven't seen that show. You're playing catch up constantly. So another person that's Andre Labrada, which I think if I look out the window, I can see his apartment because he lives literally on the other side of the Palmetto. He's an artist that worked on Blondie, the comic strip, for a long time, Hulk's Agents of Smash, and for animation. Again, local Hialeah guy, man. He's a creator of his own coffee shop of horror that's also on Webtoons. He's a local comic book artist, always creating, always doing different stuff. He just did a cover for Power Rangers. This is just his development, just to show you how he breaks down. This is a cover for one of our books called The Gun, and I think it's issue 3 that he did this cover for, and how he breaks down everything, how he breaks down color. Like, this is how far along you can get in the process if you want to be that far along in the process in comics. He looks at every kind of form, and then he starts doing the final drawing, and then how it's going to look, how she's going to look, how those colors are waylaid. And then even looking at his palette, he breaks it down in a way that's amazing to me. And then that's the final. So that ended up being the final for The Gun and everything else. Just to show, like, artistically that even design-wise, I studied sequential art at Savannah College of Art for 2 years. I got to study under James Sturm, who's amazing, who had studied under Art Spiegelman. So when I met Art Spiegelman, I used to tell him, "You're the grandfather of my education." James Sturm started also CCS up in Vermont, which is the Cartoon Center for Cartoon Studies. And it was a great, amazing thing. And he showed me a lot of different ways of doing it. I ended up finishing at University of Florida through New Orleans School of the Arts under the graphic design program, because it was the most applicable to what I was learning, to actual comics. So when I started studying and everything else, this is the stuff that I studied. I studied design, how the colors worked and everything else. Meanwhile, the whole time I was taking creative writing classes, script writing classes, everything I knew so I can kind of write a story. I've only recently come to the conclusion that I'm a writer, also an artist. It's hard. I'm like, I've never been much of a writer, so I've had to come into that conclusion. Other people start with raw pencils. This is John Byrne. John Byrne is responsible for the modernization of so many characters, but pretty much the X-Men as you know it now. He made it pop and work right there. This is some recent pencils that he did of his own, and just showing off like what you can do just with a pencil. This guy's an amazing draftsman, amazing artist, years of training, but that's all just a pencil on a paper. The lettering was obviously computer. This again, the different transformations, different stuff like that. Again, I love showing this off just to show what can be done just with a simple pencil. And you guys have so many things. So what we mean by yesterday, which we were just talking about, great story. This is something that was done. I forgot the artist's name now. Benjamin Mara. Benjamin Mara, great comic book artist. He's a very good, almost philosopher on comics. Also, there's a lot of things that I take away from him. These are comic strips that are kind of, I don't know if you could say it's a string of consciousness that he's doing, but he just draws the next panel, the next panel, the next panel, the next panel. He doesn't know where he's going with it. And then he releases every day different panels. So it's like this guy, just this guy looking at somebody, this guy looking mad, the guy with the girl, hey man, did you sleep okay? And that's it, and that will be one episode. And so he does like 3 or 4 episodes a week. He puts it on there. He has a huge following. So I want to show this too, because it can be simple. It can be simple and still have depth. And a lot of times it's going to be the thinking behind what you're making is what's going to give it anything, Yeah, it can be glamorous. It can be shiny. It has many colors, but it can also be simple. The thing is, you put your heart into it and don't BS the audience. You're going to have something that's really good. So then moving on to like, this is Boulay. No, Boulay is out of France. He's an amazing artist. One of the great guys. Again, simple. He does this with a pen. He does these on the train when he comes back and forth from the work, and he posts them. He's become huge since then. He was the artist that took over for, I forgot his name, for Asterisk, which is a huge comic in Europe. He also did the Smurfs. He's also very in demand right now. He has like a waiting list of clientele. He does comics whenever he wants to. It's great stuff. And he does a lot of autobio comics. So that's him in front of the computer there on the left. And he's just kind of making fun of like what happens online. One new comment, no idea. I only use word processor and I have a Mac. Like people that are super useless. So he did this comic strip just to like, get some stuff off his chest. Again, very simple, pen, paper, boom, put it out there. You don't have to be crazy. This is like also falls in line with like the meme kind of thing, like online that people draw and make memes. It's very simple. It's very exact. As long as you have a point and prove something, that's going to be a big thing. This is a political cartoon back from the 50s from the Islandia Journal from Cuba, just showing what you can do with one panel. You don't have to do a lot. And just showing the overreaching grasp of the Soviet Union through Cuba. They did a lot of these. This is one about Russia sending out a satellite, the satellite being Fidel. At that time, we had the missile crisis, we had everything else, and so that was illustrating what was going on over there. See, again, you can illustrate these things, and this is simple. Like the stars aren't even like a star, like it's literally a drawn star. The moon is just like drawn. It can be simple. So sometimes if you even say, well, I'm not an artist. Well, you don't have to be. We have to be as an iconographer. You have to be able to write their icons and be able to relay a story so that it can work across it. And other ones are like this that are like simple too, but they have a great quirkiness or cartoons, and they're just dark. And I follow Mr. Lowenstein for a while now. I always look at every comic that's there. Now, so going back to Will Eisner, this is Will Eisner himself. I got to meet him back in 1998 at Savannah College of Art. It was great meeting him. He's the father of sequential art. He coined the term sequential art. He's the one who made the push for a lot of comic book artists to make it something more than what it is. That it could be a tool used in everything. He even used it for the military to make diagrams and the plans and everything else. Like, okay, well, how do you, if you want to trap leaflets into a country and they don't know how to speak the language, you can't speak their language, how do you explain to them how to use a food ration or how to open a packet of pills? He was the one who pushed that idea and how to have that put forward. Very interesting man. Very good person to read. He's got one of those guys, Will Eisner, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby. These are the guys that were really progressing comics beyond what it was and beyond superheroes. He did a comic book called The Spirit that to this day, a lot of comic book artists, we study that. We look at his issues of The Spirit just because the way he would make a pen
Back on. There we go. We're back on.
Oh, okay.
Let me ask if they can hear us. Can y'all hear us?
La, la, la.
All right, awesome. Okay, we are good to go. All right.
All right, so where was I?
I know, there's something else like, we left.
Do anything else. Don't do this for a living. Oh, no. Sell hot dogs. Just try to, I just noticed like, I forget I have long hair. So sometimes I look at it, I'm like, what the hell happened to my hair? And I look like the comic book guy from Simpsons. I mean,
Oh.
yeah, I'm becoming him. I'm like, the slowly, like, this is nuts.
Yeah, actually,
Superman
actually.
18. Actually, that is nuts. Superman number 8. Radioactive boy. So anyway, so Hernandez brothers. So this was very big for me when I found the Hernandez brothers because it was Latinos making comics. And what they wrote about and drew about was Southern California punk rock scene, what they were part of, also these fictional villages in Mexico that they made up relating to their childhood. There's 3 brothers, Gilbert, Jaime, and I want to remember the last one. Too, because there's one that does comic strips on occasion. But for me, I was like, oh shit, Latinos talking about punk rock. That's how I grew up. That's what I loved as being a kid here in Hialeah. So to me, that was a huge deal. And they mostly drew these stories mostly about Maggie and Hopi, with these 2 girls that were in the punk rock scene and trying to relate it. They were like in different bands and they made different things like that. And when I found them, it was so cool because, it gives you license. You say, oh, well, if he can write and draw about the punk rock scene in his, I can draw and write about the punk rock scene in my world. So that's where I kind of got from that. I used to be the guy that I used to go to Churchill's all the time. I used to go to a place called Cheers, go to these bands, go hang out. There was that whole scene. And it's really important to be part of it. At the same time, I wanted to show this image. Forget exactly who it was. But this is just like them trying to coordinate the look on one panel, surprise, when somebody comes through the door. And this is how much thinking is involved. I'm not saying you have to do this every time, but this is how your brain should work when you're making comics. Sometimes you gotta be sitting there going, is this their best angle? Because sometimes you see these comics where it's the same side by side, talking. But what if it's from above? What if it's from the bottom? What happens when it's from the bottom? And what they're doing is they're switching the scenes around and just to say how they're going to react. This is more startled. Seems to be that one person stops and surprised. The other guy's looking while he's pouring, so he's not looking at where he's pouring more. She's looking straight forward. She's getting up off the chair. This guy seems like he's above us, right? This guy's again looking at his pouring. This guy's pouring. This guy's looking. So this is more of a zoomed in. So whoever's coming through this door, now we're going to see them. This is the kind of thinking that you got to do sometimes when you're doing this kind of storytelling. It's no different than if you're writing a novel or you're writing a script. Because where's the camera? Where's the viewer? How are you changing everything when you tell a story like that? Also, using it as a message for other things. He started drawing. This is again going back to the Hernandez brothers. What the things they did was just draw about the scene and what was going on in their world, and they were just putting these flyers up saying like, stop with the stupid violence at the shows. We're going to shows and everybody's beating each other up over stupid clicks and stupid shit like that. Hey, nothing worthwhile is free. Be a part of it, part of the scene. So I always enjoyed that. I thought that was a big deal for me. I thought that was really cool. And these are more panels from it, just showing like the different ways that they can convey a character. That's Hopi getting ready. She's deciding to cut her hair. Maggie's in the bathtub just throwing things around. Her other friend is just sitting there being cool. Those are kind of things, or some quiet moment where they're just sitting behind the thing. Not everything has to be action. Not everything has to be deep. Sometimes you become so involved in the character, they become friends to you. And if you want to see them. And sometimes you want to see them happy, you want to see them calm. So that to me is a very powerful. Others that just show these are just, again, showing sequentially what can be done. What you're reading in your mind when you're reading something like this. A lot of times I do this because, this is a bike scene that they're being chased and she's just grabbed hold and she's like, I'm sorry, if you will be, you don't grab the handlebar. And then she jumps off the motorcycle. And so what happens is there's 3 panels right here shows a situation where she grabs up, she jumps off, he keeps going forward, he's screaming for his leg, she's slipping there, she's totally in control. The cop car that was chasing him is now in this part of the panel, even though it seems to be one panel, one movement, now she's jumped over. And even the artist has decided to let this pop into this section and then come back down. And all of a sudden, right here, the cops are looking up and she's about to go through the windshield. This is the convey, again, action. And even a complicated action has like an eloquent solution. And then it's like just makes you get into something way more. You could do the same thing with a 2-page spread. You could have done the same thing with 2 panels. But what works better? This is where the artists and the writers, that's where art and writing come together, and you have to figure out how you're going to tell the story, because you're in service of the story. The story is God. Everything is for the service of the story. I always hate that I have a low pixelated version of this at home. You probably see this. This is a 2-page spread from Prometheus, written by Alan Moore. I believe Gene Ha is the artist. It is amazing because this is 4 panels, right? These are 4 panels, but it's in this rhombus strip that you see here. This eternity sign. When they're having it, you can't read it right here because it's too pixelated. They're having a conversation. This is between a girl and a god that's inhabiting her body. And they're having a conversation. If you read the conversation all the way across like this, and you keep going around, you will go into a circle. It's infinite, the conversation, every time. And the only way out is to read that final thing, and you can get to the next page. And so that's, again, the mechanics that are around in sequential art, what you can do. I'm going to find a high-res of that one day. This is the same way, another conversation they were having. This is now Prometheus with an older version of herself from the future. And she's having it, but this is as the sun is moving across this eternal plane. Again, these are gods talking. So how do you relate how gods are in an eternal place and all these different things are happening? How do you relate to that? You use these kind of panels. And you use it to come bring around something that's totally different. And again, the last panel lets you escape it, but you can go around in a circle and read that thing. Other things are more abstract. This is just a breakdown of a person telling another person this horrible story that happened to him. And as he's breaking it down, he's breaking it down across various things. This person lighting a cigarette, then sitting there talking about it, the true facts, how he sprained it, how he dislocated it, he pulled and tugged. And now all of a sudden there's gates. These are totally abstract. Some of these panels have nothing to do with the story, but they're informing your brain, informing what's going on, so you're learning it. So sometimes as a writer, you're not there to make sense. You're making a story, if that makes sense. And you're just throwing something at people while it flashes in front of them, and then they got to put it together in their head. That's the main thing about it. This is a Jack Kirby spread. Again, this is the magnanimous craziness of what this guy did. He would draw these kind of things, these kind of post-apocalyptic kind of setups and everything else, and like you see these tubes and everything else. It is just to show how big it is. This is how big the people are in this panel. And this is one word bubble, a couple of word bubbles, and that's it. So the main thing here was to show how big this machine world was. That's what it was. Again, service of the story. That's the main thing. And again, the drawing style. I just want to show this because a lot of people say, well, Jack Kirby wasn't that good of an artist. It kind of looks weird. His hands are big, his fists are kind of weird, and everything else. He didn't care because he thought that was in service of the story too. He wanted larger than life characters on a page so that you feel Iron Man is Iron Man, Doctor Strange is Doctor Strange. Years later, they saw sketchbooks of his. He could draw really good. He could draw like way better than this if he wanted to. He could draw realistically if he wanted to. But he was turning in comic books and he was doing it fast. So to him, it's more worthwhile that the story goes through than anything else. We used to have that conversation because at SCAD, we had an illustration department and we had a sequential art department. And it's like, well, what's the difference between illustration and sequential art? It's like, well, one is that you're going to use a page to tell a story. Another one is just going to use one image. You're making an image to tell a story, to convey one feeling. One's more commercial than the other and everything else. So that's why I tell you, too, that that's, again, where writing and art comes together. Sometimes you make the sacrifice and say, well, it doesn't need to be that realistic. It needs to be a good story. Same thing here. They took advantage of having this, you know, this is a Mr. Miracle panel and him trying to escape and to show that he's been surrounded by his enemies. He's ready to die, to show that kind of thing's going on. And it's a simple 2-page spread, but he would do everything. Amazing thing about Jack Kirby, he literally, how he worked was, he literally started drawing on the left side and he kept drawing until he got to the right side. He wouldn't stop. In one fell swoop. He wouldn't even use reference or anything. He would just keep drawing. Again, more things that show worlds. I want to show this because I wasn't able to show it now. I wasn't able to find it. There was an astronomer that recently was saying that Jack Kirby, he was drawing a lot of these kind of like what we call, this is what we call Kirby dots now. He did this on purpose to show like energy and crackling and form. He showed a lot of these and how he showed different galaxies and everything else. And now there's pictures that are on in color from the Hubble telescope that look the same. And it was amazing that his vision ended up being what the reality of space is. We never thought space would look like that, and it looks like that now. So then some of these are just also about the subject of things. So sometimes the subject of it can be anything. Some people think like, oh, you know, it needs to be, again, about superheroes, or it needs to be funny, or it has to be this, or it has to be that. It doesn't have to be anything. This is one comic strip that's made by, I believe her name is Harker. She literally takes old pictures, like from the turn of the century Victorian stuff, and then just puts comic strips to it. So then like he looks at one, and it's the rambling boy, and it's like, oh shit, here he comes. And then they draw the kid who's just running around like, oh man, no, you can't ramble your way out of my heart. And he just rocks on the screen. The next thing, they're all ridiculous comic strips based on stupid images from the past. That's what she likes to do. They're hilarious, they're historical. I love showing it sometimes because if you're studying any of this in art school, you're gonna be like, what? This is ridiculous. Again, another Jack Kirby page. This one I wanted to show just to show like how the basic art looks like when it's done. This is just a black and white version of it, what's going to go into the press and everything else. This is a very famous story called This Man, This Monster. It's considered the best story by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby ever about the thing. And again, this is just the, you know, I love this. It was just ridiculous. Him showing this like thing and just, you know, avenge his dignity, my removal, my thirst, you know. But again, just showing different stuff now. This is what's going on now in comics. So now there's more manga, there's more Japanese influence, Asian influence because of anime and everything else. We have a new generation of people drawing stuff, and they're going to be drawing it more dynamic than ever. So this is a great scene between Harley Quinn and Joker's new girlfriend named Punchline. And she's been beaten up, she gets up, she finally screams at her. This is without anything. This is actually, the original artwork would be full of with color, with panels, but I want to show you the black and white, how to convey the rage that the character has. She's been kicking Harley Quinn's ass the whole time. She finally gets scared, and then she gets punched in the face. And they go at each other right here. And you see her getting her comeuppance. And some things, like I said, the idea of having this across the page. This is the right side page also. We have to even now consider the facing of the pages that you're doing. Because every time, one of the biggest things has always been, that was taught to me since I was young, and that was like Stan Lee's rule, is no matter what, you have to make the reader go to the next page. That's your main goal. You want that reader to turn the page. So here we see, you know, Harley Quinn about to jump on top of the punchline. Makes you want to read the next page. I show you this, and you're gonna be like, well, what happens? Well, now you gotta buy the comic book. Now you gotta go to my store and buy the comic book. That's from Future State Gotham. This is also another work from Jack Kirby. Just again, the demon, one of the characters he was doing. This is some work from Daniel Warren Johnson and him working with it. I just wanted to show like the difference of like how he messes around. You can't see it here because it's a projection, but this is whiteout. This is some screen tone, something you buy. You literally cut it out, you place it on top. Transparent, has the dots. And he works in an old school way. I just love showing this because he's using whiteout and ink and just bam, just making the character. He is obviously incredibly talented. The guy's a beast. But no, that's a Heron. I think that's Heron. Sorry, they draw kind of similar. But showing different stuff just to show, like this is not even a cover. It's just an intro to the character, but to show the rage. So again, what we're talking about is you have a center image. The character is saying something in an ancient language. You see this up arrow. You don't even know why that's there. Why is this here? Her in her rage like this. Something striking. Something being struck. Some malignant monster coming out. A little happy face. But all of these things are informing you of what's going on here and what's happening with this character. Again, it's that formation of putting stuff together and just throwing it out there. And so then this is different. This is working on a black plane. This is working across. So the argument is sometimes is that this is how our human eyes work better. We see wide better than up and down. So some artists, what they've done is just taking this to the extreme and just taking the cinematography kind of look to it. And so this is a scene with the Kingpin just sitting there smoking a cigar, looking at the folder about somebody, and it's obviously bullseye. We have a little pen there. Him lighting it on fire in the folder. He had hired this hitman to go after Electra, and it's him sitting alone in this room with these few screens on here, light above, light in the bottom, him on the table. Very simple, ominous. This is a very ominous scene that happens for Daredevil. And then the most stylized or the most descriptive is his eyes above. Him looking over and then looking down, and then has to bring it forward. Very simple, just sequential kind of artwork. And this is another artist named Paul Pope. He's actually an Absolute artist now. He's actually doing stuff for Absolute. He's been doing a couple of things. I forgot what was it. It was a Diesel, I think Diesel Jeans. He did a couple of things on it and everything else. Again, just him like working little things out. He's actually using Morse code in some of this. It's just a weird abstract comic with this girl playing with a doll and she starts dancing. But while she's dancing, she's also doing Morse code and just shifting around. And it turns into this whole little ballet of her working on it. It's really easy. If there's any questions, let me know. I'm just going to keep going through different stuff. Again, this is just to show the sequence of something, how it can all be kind of like one image, yet we know what's going on in it, you know? So we look above and we see this guy's kind of sneaking out. He's trying to figure it out. He's tying a rope to the thing, but now he's off it, but he has a gun, so you know he's being followed. But there's other people on the rope going down. So this is all relating this one moment where everybody's freaking out about how he's sneaking these people out for them. So he's trying to save them and help them. Again, little sequential art tricks that you can do to parlay a story. Let me check my notes real quick. So yeah, so that's something I just wanted to, like, again, these are just different sequential art tricks, different things that can be drawn, different styles too. You don't have to, again, be super realistic or super this. You do have to put some time into it, but this one is just a guy laying in his bathtub. And you see from the outside of the bathroom, not inside, but you see over the bathtub and exhaling, space above, and now it's from his point of view and looking forward. That's as simple as it can get, but you're relaying some situation. You know that this is a person trying to relax, trying to find quiet time, everything else. If anybody wants to know more about also the publishing side of it, the monetary side of it, like anything like that, let me know also. I like to get into the business aspect of it. Some people want to, how to make a living at this. This is an abstract, totally abstract piece. And it's something that even I don't get totally, but I appreciate it because it seems to be this form wiggling back and forth. And if you really look at it, there's an actual story involved with the different forms that are coming in and out. But you have to actually very much pay attention to what's going on. It goes as far as that. There's a group of Israeli artists that are dedicated to making comics that can be read across the human form. Everybody in the world can read it. So they try to make wordless comics that work that way. And other stuff is just, you know, it's just like a dirty hippie trying to hypnotize a crumb. That's our crumb for you. You know? But I also like to put this because for some reason there's certain things that now are commonplace. Like this little lightning mark, everybody understands that as him trying to mesmerize her. A lot of people can look at this drawing and understand what's going on in it. Or like this, like he was talking about boob tube and everything else. Like that was his, and still his stance on TV to this day. That was his stance in '66. And then he was able to draw very realistically too. Yeah.
Question here says, do you have any tips with starting to create the comic? Do you start off with scripts or storyboards? Outlining the story?
Oh, most of the time my main thing is you want to be, in drawing they tell us the same thing. You want to go from general to specific. You don't want to just go right into hardlining something. So you want to like say, okay, what is this story about? I have a template that I use that I have on my notes that I have, and I just pretty much write out, okay, what is the concept and what is the plot? Concept and plot are the same thing. So I try to just do that. I do write an outline. Something loose. It doesn't need to be perfect. I wanted to write a comic called Merge, and the whole comic was the idea that at the moment of a breakup, these two people are breaking up, and they still love each other, but they're breaking up, and it's really bad, and it's really horrible. and they're at each other's face, and it tracks the most powerful weapon in the universe, and it crashes in the earth and crashes into both of them. And because of that, now whenever they're together, they become this weapon, but they just broke up. They're supposed to not love each other anymore. And I'm trying to relay that thing, because the whole idea was to make how beautiful love is and make it weaponized. Like maybe the one threat that we are to the universe as human beings is our capability of loving and how emotional we are. So that's what I want to do with the story. So that's pretty much what I wrote in the notebook. And from there, as an artist, I started drawing the character, kind of drawing. Sometimes you have to do the inspirational stuff first, like the stuff that makes you want to move. I have another comic book called Tanks. All it is like people in the wasteland, in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, fighting each other with tanks. But their tanks are cars and shit that they put together. Just for me to draw that. I just like drawing cars. But it'll be cool if there's a team of people in a tank and they're trying to battle each other. And it's funny because you start developing, goes, well, why isn't it mechs? Well, I don't want to do mechs. That's too far above. What if it's a team of guys in a tank and they're like bonded together like a family? And like, what if it's a family in the tank? And that's how they go across the apocalyptic wasteland. You know, like it's an RV, but it's a tank, and they're battling other people. So you start developing. See how I'm like, I'm even developing it as I'm talking about it. That's why you need to write it down. You need to draw it. That's why sketchbook. Again, sketchbook is the main thing. Start drawing it, because as you go through that journey in your head, you're going to see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And as you draw it, you'll say, oh, this is cool. This changed this. This villain now is the hero. This hero is now a villain, and you will go down the way. I had another story that I wanted to do called Hood, and mostly about this robot that looks like an archer, and he's been made to like protect people, and he's a post-apocalyptic thing again. And the whole idea is just because I like the idea of that he had gears in his chest, he grabs garbage and puts it through the gears, and the arrows come out the other side. And then his arm turns into the bow and he shoots it. And make a Robin Hood story that's post-apocalyptic. And so this robot's defending these humans from an evil sheriff and everything else. And the idea of order versus chaos and stuff like that. So these are the kind of things, again, you write across it. So write an outline, get your character concepts kind of down. I like how people do design DNA too. Like one of the things you can do is go online, grab images you like. First off, don't ever think about being so original. It's stupid. Don't go after originality. Don't go after perfection. Go after fun. Go after the experience. Go out and if you think Brad Pitt would be my perfect, the perfect star for my story, grab some pictures of Brad Pitt, put it down in a file. Use Pinterest, use Twitter, use your computer. I use the notepad, the notes on my phone. I use like crazy. My notes are full of shit. So I just grab stuff, put it in there, and I save it for later. And then when I come back, when I get down, now if you're writing something, give yourself time, even if it's an hour a day. Give yourself an hour a day. Then when you have a day off, give yourself 3 hours. Go develop and write the hell out of it. Develop the idea of it. If you're an artist, go draw the hell out of it and develop it as you go. And then you'll see that story. Once you have that outline, some of my outlines are literally page 1, this happens, page 2, this happens, page 3, this happens, page 4, this happens. And as I go, and I try to keep in mind what I want to happen. If I want page 8, they kiss, then I got to figure out how do I get to that kiss by page 8. Am I going to scrunch time? Am I going to give it time? What's going to happen? Page 12, this guy dies. Page 22, this and that. Page 24, it's wrapped up, at least for that issue. All right, I write all that out as an outline, and then I start drawing. And I start doing the pages and doing little thumbnails and say, okay, how's it going to look? How is this guy yelling? And then this guy comes in, and then she says something, and then they look at each other and they kiss. Okay, cool, boom. I try to do that. And then, again, when you go to draw, you're going to see where it goes. It would be kind of cooler if the guy was at this angle. It's going to be it's a lot of editing. It's a lot of editing. So that's what I would do. Outline, figure everything out. Like I said, a sentence for each page, and try to get to that end. And block out what's your beginning, what's your end. A lot of times for me, sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes I have something of dialogue I want, a scene I want to happen, and then I write everything and draw everything around it. And it takes a lot of, flipping forward, flipping back to get that done. All right. So then what else? Okay, so this is Paul Pope handling Batman. So you saw him doing the girl with the Morse code and everything else. It's very somber. This is Batman 100. It's a story that takes place 100 years after Batman supposedly died. And a guy is dressing up like Batman running around, being him. Trying to bring the story back. But I wanted to show the kineticness of this one of the things I like about, he does this thing where he just does this, like he just these squiggly lines. He spent a year in Japan, or 2 years, working with Kondansha and doing manga, and he learned from that. And a lot of things aren't perfect, like this is all crunched up, kind of weird, if you look at how he's done, but it shows speed, it shows everything that's going on. I think it's just super cool. I love when people use almost abstractions to get something across. Then another page, I think this is an actual art piece where they were just showing time as it passes at one point, and there's like photocopies and Xeroxes, and then some were doing inverted, and just to show the time in one place, and they just used this as a simple way. So you can use even photography, you can use simple things, they just drew on top of photography, photocopied it to show time and space passing at one point. That was a cool print. This is Jimmy Corrigan, the smartest kid on earth. This is by Chris Ware. For a lot of comic artists, it's very daunting. It's a very huge thing because it's very exact, very beautiful. These are actually inked pages that he does. It's one of those things that when Chris Ware does this, it blows our minds. I love that he has Quimby's here. This is actual comic book shop in Chicago. And this is one page. And he does these dense comic books that have so many different stuff on here. And him reading and looking at all the different comics. And they're like, I Hate America, Lamp Dog, like stuff like that, and how bad comics are right now. But him just relating, and then he has his panels and everything. So it could be something complicated like this. He does a lot of graphic design and a lot of the stuff that he does. So it's something else to look forward to. His books are like products. Like if you find his books, they have like maps that fold out and things that go into other things. So it's really cool. This was just a simple, I think this is, oh my God, I forgot his name, J.H. Rivera. He actually lived here in Hialeah. Yeah, it was a car, he unfortunately passed 2 years ago from COVID. But he was one of the pages that he did, and I just love it because it's just a guy like lighting a cigarette. And that's just, to me, like it was a very cool, somber kind of look at it. This is something more kinetic. This is a fight between these two people. This is for a comic book called Scumbag. These two super spies fighting each other. But just to show, again, that's the different ways of like, there's like literally the air is shifting. There's blurs here, just like in the movies, as they fight each other, where the fist is overbent, overlong. So exaggeration helps big time in the comic book story. And him hitting her foot, and then she comes out and slams on him, and it's just like you see everything that's going on. Just again, the blur of the lines. There's another thing, if you're learning to do comic book art, and I've heard this from 3 very professional people and legends in the industry, copy. If you need to copy. There's nothing wrong with that. There are people that is like, they want to be original, they want to be this. It's okay, copy. If you're to learn, copy. Don't make it your original work, copy. It's all right. Because if you're learning like that, if I'm like right now trying to figure out how a panel is looking and how I'm going to take someone, this might be the perfect thing. And maybe I take something from this and use it for everybody does. Neil Adams yelled at me at a con for 20 minutes. I made that, everybody copies. Everybody does it. Everybody in the industry. You have a deadline you have to meet, do it. So he yelled that at me a couple of times and another artist, and we just sat there going, okay, Mr. Adams. But that's a part of the process. Don't say it's your own shit. Don't do that. But go and say, okay, I've been working on this, what I'm learning, and make it your own. What was it? Good artist, what was it? The bad artist steal, good artist borrow. I think that's the expression. Right? So that's the thing. So try to use that. And then again, just showing like what can be done if you pull something apart and you add so this is like about a 20 panel grid system. And if you look at it, there's 20 grid panels and it just shows the cityscape. So let's say, all right, we're reading left to right, right? So if you're reading left to right, there's a city, you kind of left the city, you're going through some trees, then you're coming out. You're gonna come down again. So here's the city, here's something like that. Now we're in the countryside, there's construction happening. There's a car still leaving. We go this way. Now we see a tire in the mud. There's a little cat. We're still in the city. The cat's looking out. Still in the city. The cars are passing. The cat is running. Still in the city. We go looking over. And all of a sudden, this guy says, "Attention!" The cat runs out in front. The guy says to stop. Here's a crack. And then this is where the part of the story. Luckily, it didn't get the cat. the cat got across, and then that's where the cat in the car screams the name, and it's like, they thought Daddy saw his friend. But this is how a breakdown of everything, and now if you went from up to down, you see the traveling of the cat, it works in a lot of different ways to show a situation and break it down across a bunch of different panels. And then this is a great I love this because it was from a recent book from Batman Catwoman, where it shows her in the future, but you didn't know. And so there's just this romantic situation where it's Batman and Catwoman talking, saying, I have to go to the city with the Joker broke out of, I have to, and then he kisses her, and then Cat, he goes, you have to go. He goes, I do. And then they kiss one more time, and he leaves, and then that's Catwoman now. And she's these are the grandkids. So you don't know what happens in the story, but that was such a great intro because you went, what happened? Did they get together? What's going on? That to me was such a brilliant stroke on there. And for my final panel, it is one of my favorite pages of all time. This is by Paul Pope. I love it because it's just big intro. You see the cityscape, you see everything that's going on. It's fully kinetic. You can sit there for a while and look around. You see like homeless people, there's sound effects. Then this nice wide panel, and he did it on purpose. And if you read left to right, this is kind of blank, featureless, gets more detailed, now you see everything, and then it's perfectly detailed here. Then it gets like, it gets kind of detailed, then it becomes abstract again, it goes off the page, becomes white. To focus on him, on the person coming in, and then there's just a crowded night, and they're talking, and then they're like, them walking around, they're gonna get like this 4D booth, because it takes place in the future. I just love this panel. I love this page, it's one of my favorite pages ever. And I think that's pretty much the end of like my samples of everything I have to say. I will tell you this, that it is like in many industries, there's a lot of ways about it. There's ways that you can do this independently. There's ways you can do this in a group. I will tell you from my own knowledge, it's better to go with a group. It's better to have a community behind you. It's better to have people, even if it's just to bounce a question off of, show your work. It's one of the things that we do at the shop sometimes. We have drinking draws. We have nights that we get together. We're planning to do more of them now. But most of the time, if you come into the shop on most days, we're here there talking and we're showing each other work and trying to see where we're going with the next page and trying to inspire each other. So I always say, if you can find a group of like-minded individuals, even if it's just to print something or to do a show and share a table or something, it is of great benefit. It's a great help for you. So I would try to do that. Yes.
So we have 2 questions just popped up. First question is, how does publishing work? And the second one is with business advice for beginners.
Okay. Publishing. Well, publishing is all dependent on, again, what your background is and what you want to do. Right now, if you make a comic book in less than let's say you make a little 4-page comic, in less than 20 minutes you can have it online and display it to the world. I mean, that's publishing technically. You can put it on your Instagram, you can put it on Tumblr, you can put it on WordPress, you can put it on a blog, you can put it on Facebook, and you can have it out there, people can see it. And if you've seen memes, and somebody publishes one little funny thing or something that people like, people will reprint it, re-put it up, and now it's all over the place. As far as publishing as a business and printing and putting something out, that's a whole other bag. Publishing is very arduous because what you're trying to convince is people of reading your work, getting into what you're doing. It's some of it's just getting something to print. Like I said, it takes a whole day for somebody to make 1 page of comics. And most comic book artists work at 1 page, maybe 2 pages. It depends. There's some artists that are just doing pencils. So if they're just doing pencils, they can do 1 or 2 pages. If somebody's just doing inks, they can do 3 or 4 pages. Somebody's doing a lettering, they can do 8 pages a day. So they can do all this, and you can get a comic book out in less than a month. If it's just you and you're putting it together, then you got to figure out how you're going to do that. That's a whole other bag. On the publishing side. Once you get into, let's say you have your book done and you want to get it out, you want to do it, then you have to make the decision of how you're going to print it, how you're going to put it out. There's a lot of places that you can do POD. If you're familiar as a writer, you can go on Amazon, you can upload your novel, and Amazon, somebody wants to buy your novel, they print it when they buy it and they send it to them, and that's it. It's called print on demand. It's called POD. That's one way of getting something out there. POD is not for everybody. Sometimes people feel like that's kind of a lost world. Some people get ebooks. Some people share it for free. They put it on their Patreon. They put it on their blog. That's another way. But once you start publishing, you really want to make an audience and put people behind it. It's a lot of social media. It's a lot of pushing your idea out there. You are selling to people. You become a salesman at the same time. And it's kind of hard for artists and writers because we're introverts. We don't want to deal with people. We want to just make the things and you buy them. But we need to put them on display and put them out there. That's part of the publishing aspect of the world. I'd say a lot of times for any of you who are just writers and you want to work with an artist, that's going to be the aspect that you might be engaging with. Because the artist is going to be busy drawing it. If he's at a con and you're both showing off the book, he's going to be busy drawing pages so that people can see it, and you're going to be the carnival barker talking to people and introducing it. So you have to have your byline and your sales line for it. When I talked about Tommy, a lot of people's eyes lit up because I could say, oh, it's a kid with an imaginary friend and finds out his imaginary friend's a serial killer. When I say that line, everybody lights up because they go, oh shit, for real? And because I've said it a million billion times. I pretty much figured out how to sell the book in one line. And right there, I can tell if people are into it or not into it. Because there's some people that go, ew. Like, I don't want to read that. And I'll be like, oh, cool. Where's that? So you have to develop that. And once you're publishing, you have to deal with distribution. Distribution's a whole other bag. We deal with Diamond. We're dealing with Lunar. We're dealing with different distribution companies that these are the guys that get your stuff into the comic book shop. That is hard because now you have to advertise. You got to call comic book shops. You're going to wear a lot of hats. There's a local company called Mad Cave Studios. They're another comic book publisher down here in South Florida. And I always appreciate that those guys come to my shop and they bring some copies of their books and they talk to everybody and they try to push it forward. You got to learn to do that if you're going to be self-publishing. Some people do risographs. Some people do zines. Some people just put it out there. There's a lot of ways of putting it out there. But they get eyes on the page. You have to do the work. You have to go out there and put that kind of out. If you're starting, start small, do web comics, you can go to Webtoons right now, webtoons.com, sign up for an account, and you can post a comic book up on there. And you can get an audience through there, people can follow you, and there's even a chance of making money off there because you can make money off the advertisement. Then you can make a Patreon and people can support you on there, and you'll see other people doing it and doing it very successfully. But you have to be on it. And if you do a web comic and you say, all right, every Wednesday is a new comic strip, guess what? Every Wednesday is a new comic strip. You have to have that comic strip up. So I would try to do that for sure. What was the other one?
Before I go into this one, from the room, anyone would like to ask any questions from our group here? Any questions?
Yeah.
You say you have worked with Marvel and DC before, right?
Yeah.
Which do you like more, Marvel or DC?
For me, it was Marvel, just because it was a little bit more exciting. The stuff I did for DC was very minor. I was just like illustrating a couple of pinups and everything. It wasn't anything out of this world. And it was a while ago. Marvel actually gives me more work. So I did the Upper Deck sketch cards for them. So I got to work on Doctor Strange. I got to work on Multiverse of Madness already. I got to work on a couple of different things. Nothing out of this world, but I've worked on the new Spider-Man set. I also did work for Jay and Silent Bob. So those are the things that I worked on. So that was really fun. That was a cool project because it was more carte blanche. They were like, do whatever you want. It's crazy. But then later on, they were rejecting stuff. So they're like, this didn't work. This didn't work. This is cool. But it was fun because I got paid and it was a good project. So Marvel, for me, I'm also more of a Marvel guy. I'm not as much of a DC guy. Watch, I lose my audience now. I was like, bye.
Tables moving on.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions from the group here? Okay. Question here says, is there a way to keep your work / comics safe when putting it out there online for the public to view without someone stealing it and making a profit on it? Watermarks?
Yeah, watermarks are one thing, but they look like crap. That's the only thing. It looks like crap. I get review copies all the time from companies that want to sell comics to us, and they put watermarks on them, and it just looks like crap. I understand it. I would do that. The main thing, the rip-off thing, I always tell people, look, if they're willing to rip you off, that's a good thing. That's great because that means you have something that people want. So that's nice. That's awesome that somebody rips you off like that. Well, we've had a couple of cases like that. There's not a lot of things you can do when we've had people literally take the concepts that we've made and made their own books. And I've seen it. And I'm like, wow, okay, screw that. But our concepts weren't that original to say in the first place. You can just replace the gun with a knife. And, Tommy instead of a rabbit, something else. I mean, people always do something. That's neither here nor there. You can't do that. The best bet to actually protect your work is to get your work out there. That's the best thing you can do, because that's going to be the burden of proof later on. I've been a part of 2 or 3 like copyright cases. And a lot of times people are worried about copyright. First off, that whole mailing yourself a thing and it's copyrighted, that's bullshit. Don't do that. That's garbage. The real main thing is to have it like out there. So you upload it, let's say, to a blog on your server. It says when you loaded it, when it came in, and there's the timestamp. And that's something that you can't really hack that. You can't do anything. So that's one way. Other things are witnesses. You have a lot of people say, I saw him publish this, or I saw him post this on this day. That's going to help also. If Disney happens, look, the truth of the matter is this: if Disney happens to make your character and somehow made a comic or movie about it, and it's similar, and you have some kind of case, look, they'll pay you off or something like that, most likely. Or they're going to sue you to the end of the world because they have a building full of lawyers that can just sit there and have you in court for the rest of your life, and you'll go bankrupt trying to like pay a lawyer. So it's really, to the matter, the best thing you can do is get your work out there. Don't worry about it. If you do get ripped off, that's nice. That's actually wow. Like then you have something. Then produce more work that you overdreamed. Produce the work, get it out there. That's the main thing.
Follow-up question is: do comic artists make use of Creative Commons?
Creative Commons? Oh, Creative Commons? Yes, and yes, they do. There's some artists that have used it. There's some talk about it. There's some characters that have become open source. So there's some characters like it's not the Shadow just yet. I heard the Shadow might become, because Dynamite owns one version. Right now, copyright's also mixed up. Like Zorro is technically free domain. Zorro technically, but then there's 2 companies that claim copyright on it, depending on the movie version or the book version. So there's this whole thing about that with Zorro. Same thing with Frankenstein. Like Frankenstein is open source, like open. But if you put a flat top, what?
We lost the back screen for some reason. Oh, it might be your computer. It might have.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Oh, okay. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so like, all right, Frankenstein. Frankenstein's totally in the public domain, but you know, if you happen to make the Frankenstein with a flat head and the bolts on the neck, guess what? Universal Studios is gonna sue the crap out of you, because the movie version isn't.
Right.
So Dracula is, but the movie version is. So there's that weird kind of thing back and forth. But yeah, with the open, I've seen a couple of people do that. I haven't seen anybody take it all away. I have one character that I always said that if I make the superhero story and it works and everybody digs it, I thought, you know what, if I die, I'm just going to make it open afterwards and see what other comic book artists do. And there are some. If you go online, I think there's some Creative Commons superheroes that you can use. There's some guidelines for them too. Like I think there was one that they said that was for like they wanted only like general audiences. They didn't want anybody. But as long as you follow those rules, you would be canon. And so that is interesting. It's interesting, but I haven't seen enough of that.
Another question here is, this is a tough one. Who is your favorite superhero villain from both Marvel and DC?
Damn, really? One of those questions. Like I don't see this every day when it comes to being in a comic book shop. For Marvel, I've always been partial to Doctor Doom. I think that's just one of my favorites, because he's not evil, and in essence, what he does is evil, because he believes he's smart enough and great enough that he should rule the world. He's pretty much saying, I'm going to do you a favor, I'm going to rule the world for you, and everything will be fine as long as Doom says so. I'm like, this guy, look at what he thinks. So I always thought that was interesting. I thought that was cool about, he's second to Reed Richards as the smartest person in the world, as scientist, and he's second to Doctor Strange as the sorcerer. So there's like one guy better than you in both things. So it's like, and it's just proven time and time again. And then there's been stories where Doom has become God and everything else. So I think he's always been one of my favorites as far as everything else. And the DC universe is kind of a back and forth, because some characters more than others. One thing I tell people that they always express, I dislike the Joker greatly, because I know a lot of people like him, it's a kooky character, but if you really read him, he is a horrible, horrible, horrible villain. And he is a rapist, and he's a genocidal maniac, and he's, Holocaustic. I mean, it's just really bad. So every time people are like, oh, the Joker's so cool, I'm like, no, not a good character to dig. The one character that I did like because there were certain scenes and things is Lex Luthor. And only because they have written, he has beaten Superman. And Superman still beats him. You get that? Like, there's a great scene, they animated it recently, where he stole Superman's powers. So he has all of Superman's powers, and Superman's kind of sitting in front of him all week and everything. But then he got to see the world as Superman. And he saw how all life is connected, that he could see the mitochondria that's between everybody, how the trees smelled in Canada from thousands of miles, and he saw all of life, and he goes, no wonder he saves everybody. No wonder life is so precious to him, because he can see life, and it stopped him. He could, right there, he could have destroyed Superman, and he goes, I can't, because now I see life as him. And I was like, great fucking story. So this is one of those things I really dig. So I always like Lex Luthor for that, in a sense, because he's man's avatar of everything going to at a million. You know what I'm saying? The capitalist. One of the things I did is they thought he used to be like a fat guy because he wanted to be like a fat capitalist, but then he was built. Now he's built, and there's a great thing in All-Star Superman where he's running on a treadmill, and Clark Kent is interviewing him. And he goes, you see this, Clark? This is real muscle. I built that. And what muscle did he build? What did he do? He got that powers out of nowhere. I built my body. I did everything that. And you're like, I agree with him. And nothing is better than a villain you agree with. Like, you sit there going, I shouldn't be doing this. So, yeah, so Lex Luthor, DC, Marvel, it's Dr.
There's a lot of comments coming here also in the chat.
They're like, you're Rod?
No. Like, really kind of like giving each other advice, which is really great to see this. The idea of putting watermarks, putting it on the Instagram. A mention of Lore Olympus, which is another webcomic.
Oh, yes, on Webtoons. Very huge.
It's printed now, too. I think I should.
Yes. Yeah.
Let me see what else he.
That's actually one of those comics that I would say is a very good success story on Webtoons. And Webtoons now, just again, if you want to make something that you eventually want to see as a TV show or make anything like that, Webtoons now, I think that a lot of people, they have a deal that they're being approached by Amazon and by Netflix. So.
This is a question asking, do you think Steve Ditko gets recognition for creating Spider-Man? Also, Jack Kirby as well?
To a certain degree, they do. I mean, Jack Kirby didn't really work on Spider-Man per se. He did do some drawings. I don't think he did pinups and stuff. Steve Ditko worked on it. Steve Ditko did the designs of it and everything else. I think they are getting their just due now. You hear about it now that Marvel's been settling with a lot of different creators. It's because Marvel, unfortunately, before Disney bought it, was still a company on its own, and they're jerks, and they didn't want to pay out people. And now that Disney came around, Disney was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, the mouse was like, and just threw money out. So a lot of characters are getting, so I applaud them for that effort, and they should have gotten that. Ditko, went off the deep end and became an obscure comic book artist for many, many years because of that, kind of like seeing how the industry was. But he had his own weird politics and everything else. And Jack Kirby was underappreciated, and he was kind of not a pariah, but kind of was like an outsider by the end of his life when he created almost everything that you see up there. So, what's up?
Which superhero do you like to watch the most? Movies, TV shows, or cartoons?
Like what format?
Yeah.
To what? I always say this. This is my arrogant way of saying this. I read my comics. I don't watch my comics. So I read a lot. I don't really watch too many things, but I'm not gonna be a lie. I like watching Marvel movies like as much as anybody else. Like a friend of mine gifted me a ticket to Spider-Man opening night. He was like, "Hey, bro, come with me and watch it. Like those tickets are going for stupid money now." And I was like, "Dude, I don't really want to. Like I don't really want to go because it's gonna be horrible." So I like Marvel movies. I like the cartoons. I love all the DC animated stuff. Is amazing too. Nowadays it's like you can go on Netflix, you can go on all these things, and I have everything: Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount, and all this. So I watch a bunch of different stuff when I get a chance. But I tend to read my stuff all the time. I like reading the comics because they're more involved, there's more stuff going on, and I always feel like the animated shows and the movies are catching up. So every time they show something, I'm like, oh yeah, that happened in issue 184. So.
Did you find more enjoyment working with Marvel, having the opportunity to recreate their characters, or creating your own stories / ideas? What keeps you going?
What keeps me going? Part of it, as an artist, is a challenge. I don't really get to really recreate anything. They have you get a paper, they get like a little booklet thing of like 4 or 5 pages stapled together, and they tell you what you can draw, what you can't draw. Because I was doing illustrations for trading cards, I couldn't draw guns, I couldn't draw anybody smoking, I couldn't just, so they have their rules. There are characters, they said, nope, don't draw these. For a long time, you couldn't draw Fantastic Four, because the Fantastic Four were under Fox and X-Men, so you couldn't draw them together at all. So I had a lot of stuff like that. My independent work is a lot more fun, because you're drawing your own stuff, you're creating your own stuff. It's fun to go somewhere weird with it and mess with it and go somewhere really, I like I said, it's okay to throw away stuff. I go off the deep end with something, I draw this, I draw that, I do the story, I'm like, and then I'm like, oh wow, this doesn't work at all. Not throw it away, but I end up putting it in a folder and putting it aside. But I love the creative process. And when you see a story, and what I love the best, the height of this is when you've created this, and I want to remember the artist that told me this. He says, when you're finished, when it's done, it's beautiful. When you're done and you hand it up and the best thing in the world is when somebody comes up to me and they read the book and they get it. And then they say, dude, I like this, and they start talking to me about it like fans, and I get to be a fan too of my own work. He's like, yeah, that's what I'm planning. So once you have that situation, it's a great thing. And somebody gets a joke that you did. It makes you not feel so alone. It makes you feel like your point of view is valid. It's a beautiful situation. So when I have had that happen with artists, with fans, it's amazing. I think that's one of the best things you can do.
This question says, do you like the MCU movies, and do you think they're staying true to the comics?
No, they're their own thing, and I'm totally fine with that. I have no problem with it. Some things that are controversial, and it's not the things you think it is. Ultron being created by Iron Man and the Hulk was a huge problem with a lot of comic book readers, because it was Hank Pym that created him. So they were like, what happened? Like, this ain't no comics I know. So that was one of the big things that they were kind of like about. I don't really care. There's some things that have to be changed. And when they were talking about Shang-Chi, those comics are racist as hell. They're really racist. They're really bad. They're just very, not even, I would say anti-Asian. It was just making fun of Asians in a horrible way. So I get it. They said, yeah, we threw out like 90% of that, didn't use it, and created Shang-Chi by whole cloth. And I went, okay, great. I think that was that was fine. So I don't mind having an MCU. Like I said, the MCU is one thing, Marvel Comics is another. And I have no problem with that. That's fun.
See, do you like when they're showing darker shows of superheroes such as The Boys and Invincible?
Oh yeah, that's my bread and butter. First off, I'm always one of those guys that get pissed off because I've been recommending the Invincible for years, and then there's one animated show and everybody starts reading it. I had stacks of those books in my comic book shop, and I'd be like, dude, you like superhero comics, read this, and we're like, Now they're like, I can't keep anything in stock. And that was a great, Ryan Otley was the artist on it. He's one of my favorite artists out there. He's doing the Hulk right now, which is a great story. I like darker stories too. When you talk about Glenn Fabry, you're talking about Preacher. He did the covers for Preacher. Preacher was one of my favorites. Preacher broke my brain in the 90s. This is one of those things that you got it. What am I reading? Should I be reading this? Like, you carried it with you like porn. You're like, like, let me put it under my shirt or something. Like, you didn't want to get caught reading it. It was an amazing book. Glenn Fabry's covers for that what made it. So I love dark stuff. The Boys, I like Garth Ennis because he's an amazing writer. He did an amazing run on Punisher. So he wrote the Punisher I wanted to see. But yeah, I would dare say, yeah, all the darker stuff, I love it. That's what's called outlaw comics now. Outlaw comics is a term. If you guys ever get to watch a show called Cartoonist Kayfabe, if you really want to get into comics and study it, it's on YouTube. It's run by 2 comic book artists, and they got to talk about it. Outlaw comics is Faust, and it's not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of bloodiness and nudity and everything else. But it talks about these underground comic book artists that were making these comics during a time where that was very not okay. and they had an audience for it. Faust was one of them and everything else. So it falls in that line of that kind of thing.
This is, I'll throw in a question, because, thinking of this conversation, this topic, I'm thinking about particularly vertical, for me, because I think we share kind of a chronology. For me, the advent of vertical was such a huge, kind of moment in comics, particularly all the British writers who kind of came in. So thinking about how that in the 90s changed the landscape, do you think maybe in the future there'll be some other kind of event like the advent of like a publisher or another kind of a change in publishing that will revolutionize comics?
It's being revolutionized all the time. Right now, this is the great thing about publishing. Right now, like I said, you can get a comic book up in less than an hour online and get it out there. There are companies that are making some great stories. Ablaze is one of them, led by Axel Alonso. It's the comic book company that I'm looking out for, because like Boom Studios does really good stuff. Image still great track record of great comics, but they're still the guys that are really pushing the envelope and they're really doing some stuff that I haven't seen. Indies are way better than, right now for me, myself personally, indies are way better than Marvel and DC. I'm a fan still of Thor because Donny Cates is writing it. Hulk is, I'm more a fan of the writers than the actual comic book artists. So as far as like somebody like Vertigo again, that was magic in a bottle. That was an amazing time. That was like what we needed at the moment. Nobody had this. That's amazing. I don't know if anybody's going to do anything like they tried to. Some of the editors went off of Karen Bergen and everything. They made Bergen Street. A lot of these people that tried to make their own comics in there, they still did great stuff, but wasn't exactly hit it at the time. But there's some people like I would again, like if I was looking out for stuff, look at Ablaze. Ablaze, AWA, Artist Workshop also is doing great work.
We have maybe time for one more question from the group before we kind of wrap everything up and adjourn. So I'm just looking here at the chat. Is there any other questions? Now would be the time. Okay, so what's the YouTube channel again?
Oh, Cartoonist Kayfabe, Kayfabe. Kayfabe is a wrestling term from the wrestling. It's when you kind of like, you play like the bad guy, you play the good guy, you play like, the whatever it is. And so they kind of play that into their show. But it's run, I forgot the artist names. Man, I'm so bad with names today. But one of the artists is the guy with the Hip Hop Family Tree. And he recently did a comic strip, what the heck was it called? Ed Piscor, Jim Rowe. Amazing guys. Those guys too, if you want, follow them on Patreon. They have really good resources. They tend to post some really, especially Jim Rowe. He talks about scene making, design, really the aspects of like printing and publishing and everything else. That's the thing too. That's the reason why, like I would tell people, like if you're gonna get into something like this, it's good to have all types of skills. Graphic design skills, basic, web skills, basic, having those skills, because if you're gonna be you gotta be a jack of all trades. That to me is the main thing. Yes.
Are you more of a superhero or a supervillain?
Me personally? Wow, I want to say superhero. But I think there's some people out there that can call me a supervillain. But I'm more of a superhero. I want to champion things. I want to help people. I want people to be happier. I want people to be that have access to it. The worst thing that happens, and I want to sound like the old guy, but this is one of the things that I've noticed, especially with you younger guys. A lot of you guys, for some reason, somebody put it in your head and made you think you couldn't do stuff. You're amazing. Do stuff. It's better to mess up than to do nothing at all. And that's one of the things I champion with my shop. I champion with comics and everything else for people. It's amazing how many people are like, oh, I'm scared. They'll jump out of a plane, but they won't stand on a podium and talk to people for 10 people. It's insane to me. So just do that. Do those things that you care about and you really want, and go after it, bro. And, like I said, when I was 18, you comí candela. I was nuts. So I went after everything I wanted. So, and I am where I am because of that.
I think that is probably the perfect place to kind of, bring everything to a close. That kind of message that you have.
I think she's a superhero.
I love it. I want to thank you again
All
All
right.
right, I think we're back. I was just kind of going through my thank you at the end. You all hear me okay? Mic check, 1, 2. We're good. We have that.
All right.
All right, okay, good. Again, just thanking Juan. Juan has been like a big supporter of the college, student writers workshops and, even, book fair over the last couple of years.
Mhm.
So thank you again. We hope that maybe.
I'm here to support. And like I said, if myself, if you want to follow me online, you can go to fwacata.com, FWACATA. That's the main place I'm at. You can find my email or my whatever on there too. So in case anything, I'm just going all the way back and trying to find. Oh, there it is. Just go to fwacata.com. You can find me on there. If you're working on a comic book project, you need another pair of eyes on it. You can always, send me an email, send me a message, DM me. You can also come by the comic book shop. You can come by and just ask a question. I'm there Mondays through Fridays. I got to go back there now because I got a market going on. But yeah, come through to take a look at anything that you want and we'll work on it because I'm always looking to help people out, especially to make more comics.
Awesome. So again, Juan, thank you so much. Media Services, thank you all for supporting us here. They've been,
Thank you, guys.
moving the cameras. Thank you.
They're the professionals that make me look good.
Yeah, Student Life for providing, for those who are here physically, we have some lunch. So thank you, Student Life, for providing us with some lunch. And special thanks again to Director Andrea Ferrero for sponsoring and coordinating the event for today. So without further ado, I'm going to stop the recording. Again, our thanks.
Thank you, guys.